In the quiet town of Elmsworth, a chilling legend passed from generation to generation had secured its place in local folklore. Children were warned never to go out trick-or-treating past the stroke of midnight on Halloween. The elders spoke of a ghostly trick-or-treater who roamed the moonlit streets, wearing tattered clothes and an eternally grinning pumpkin mask. The legend said that he didn't just collect candy, he collected souls. Teenagers, as they often do, saw this story as a challenge, rather than a cautionary tale. On Halloween night, a group of 5 friends, Sarah, Jack, Emily, Mark, and Brian, decided they would defy the warning. Armed with flashlights and bags filled with candy from their earlier exploits, they ventured out into the streets just as the clock struck midnight. The atmosphere had shifted. What was a festive, family-filled night had turned eerily still. Fog rolled in like a spectral sea, filling the spaces between houses and trees. Crickets and night critters silenced themselves as if obeying an unspoken command. "See? Nothing's happening. It's just a stupid legend," Brian scoffed, leading the pack. His bravado seemed to fuel the group's collective courage. They continued walking, and soon noticed that their flashlights flickered in unison. "Must be some sort of electrical interference," Mark rationalized. That's when they heard it, the distant sound of footsteps shuffling along the asphalt. It was as if someone or something was dragging its feet lazily yet deliberately. Sarah felt her heartbeat quicken. She looked around but saw nothing. "Maybe it's just another late-night trick-or-treater," Emily suggested, though her eyes betrayed her unease. The footsteps grew louder, and a faint silhouette emerged from the mist. The shape seemed both human and otherworldly, its body awkwardly limping, as if obeying a different set of physical laws. The figure wore a tattered coat and held a bag that sagged heavily at its side. Its face was concealed by a pumpkin mask that seemed to glow with a light of its own. "Oh my God, it's real," Jack muttered, his voice trembling. Before they could react, the figure stopped in front of them. "Trick or treat," it rasped in a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of a long-forgotten well. The group was paralyzed, fixated on the glowing pumpkin mask that seemed to leer at them with malevolent glee. "Trick or treat," the figure repeated, more urgently this time. Its bag opened slightly, revealing that it was not filled with candy, but with an inky darkness that seemed to absorb all light, a blackness so profound that it looked like a piece of the night sky devoid of stars. Finally snapping out of their trance, Mark nervously pulled a candy bar from his bag and dropped it into the ghostly trick-or-treater's sack. The figure nodded and continued on its path, disappearing into the fog. "Was that what I think it was?" Emily stuttered. "I think so," Sarah replied, "and I think we just got lucky." They decided to end their night right then and there, walking quickly back to Sarah's house where they had originally met up. But when they got there, they found that they were one short. Brian was missing. Panicking, they retraced their steps. There was no sign of him. Finally, they returned to the spot where they had encountered the ghostly trick-or-treater. On the ground, they found Brian's flashlight and a single piece of candy. Then they heard a faint whisper. "Trick or treat." They turned around, and there he was, wearing a tattered coat, holding a bag filled with an impenetrable darkness. But the most chilling part was the pumpkin mask he wore. It glowed softly, and behind those carved eyes, they could see a flicker of what used to be Brian, now just another soul trapped in an endless night of trick-or-treating. Frozen in terror, they watched as their transformed friend limped away into the mist, eventually becoming one with the fog that shrouded the cursed town of Elmsworth. From that Halloween on, no one in the group dared to venture out past midnight, and they made sure to pass down the tale to younger generations. However, the legend had changed a little. Now, the ghostly trick-or-treater had companions, and if you listened closely on Halloween night, just after the clock struck 12, you could hear multiple sets of footsteps, shuffling in the foggy dark, collecting not just candy but souls, forever.
It was Halloween night, and Marcy's party was the talk of the town. Cobwebs adorned the walls and ghoulish figures lurked in the corners. Just past midnight, the doorbell rang one final time. Marcy opened the door to find a mysterious stranger in an old-timey photographer's getup, black cape, top hat and all. "For the hostess of the grandest Halloween party," he said, handing her an antique camera, This will capture memories you'll never forget. Before Marcy could inquire further, the stranger vanished into the chilly night. Intrigued, she took the camera and rejoined her guests. "Let's take some hauntingly good photos," she exclaimed. People gathered in groups, posing next to skeletons and fake tombstones. Marcy clicked away, the flash casting eerie shadows. The night wore on, filled with laughter and screams from faux scares. Finally, Marcy decided to check the pictures. The first few looked normal, grinning faces and playful poses. But as she flicked through them, her heart began to pound. Each photo showed translucent figures lurking near her friends, a spectral hand over Mike's shoulder, an ethereal face next to Sarah's, a ghastly figure standing beside Jack. Terrified but curious, Marcy decided to take more photos. This time, however, the images were different. The spirits had come into focus, their expressions twisted into malevolent sneers. They no longer stood beside her friends but seemed to be reaching for them. Marcy felt her breath catch. These weren't playful Halloween pranks. Something was horribly wrong. She rushed back to the party, camera in hand, only to find everyone immersed in festivities, completely oblivious to the spectral dangers. Taking a deep breath, Marcy took one last photo, this time of the entire room. When she looked at the picture, her blood turned to ice. The room was filled with spirits, their ghostly fingers inches from each guest, as if ready to snatch their souls. In a frenzy, Marcy grabbed a nearby hammer and smashed the camera to bits. The moment she did, the room turned ice cold, lights flickered, and for a split second, everyone could see their own breath. A collective gasp filled the room. Then just as quickly, the room returned to normal. The partygoers shrugged off the incident as a strange electrical hiccup, and the night continued. But Marcy couldn't shake off the feeling that they had narrowly escaped something dreadful. As for the mysterious stranger, he was never seen again. But Marcy couldn't forget those haunting images, or shake the feeling that the camera had been more than just a device. It was a window into another realm, a realm that had almost claimed them all. To this day, Marcy refuses to take photos on Halloween night, terrified of what the camera might reveal. And every year, as the leaves turn and the air grows cold, she wonders about the spirits that might still be lurking, unseen but ever so close.
Once upon a chilling Halloween night, the small town of Hollow Creek was buzzing with the excitement of costumes, candy, and childhood laughter. It was a quaint little town, where the community's bonds were as sturdy as the old oak tree that stood tall in the heart of the central playground. Parents exchanged small talk while children scampered about in their adorable or terrifying attire. However, despite the gaiety, an ominous shadow loomed over the town's playground. Unbeknownst to the blissfully ignorant community, the playground had a grim history. Just beyond its boundaries, where the cheerful laughter and lively chatter faded into a haunting silence, was an ancient clearing. Old records told of a coven that performed dark rituals there. Although the coven had long since disbanded, some believed that their sinister influence still lingered. On Halloween night, whispers among the children circulated about dares and challenges. "Bet you can't stay at the Devil's Playground till midnight," one kid would challenge another. The name Devil's Playground had stuck ever since someone unearthed an old newspaper article about the coven's rituals. Anna, a naturally curious 12-year-old with a flair for adventure, felt intrigued by these rumors. The idea of something supernatural happening in her boring little town was too tempting to resist. Armed with a pocket flashlight, her dad's old watch, and an adrenaline-charged courage, she set out for the Devil's Playground as the clock neared 11. She pushed open the rusty gate, its creaky wails a stark contrast to the hauntingly silent playground. The moon cast eerie shadows on the swings, slides, and seesaws. Anna felt her pulse quicken, but pushed herself forward. "Let's see if there's any truth to this," she muttered, taking out her dad's watch. It was 11:45 p.m. Suddenly, the temperature seemed to drop a few degrees. Anna could see her breath in the air, crystallizing into tiny puffs of mist. She clutched her flashlight tightly as she moved toward the swings. That's when she noticed it. The swings were moving, but there was no wind. Back and forth, they creaked and groaned as if an invisible child was playing on them. Anna felt a shiver run down her spine, but her adventurous spirit urged her on. She moved towards the seesaw, which seemed undisturbed. But as she touched its wooden plank, the seesaw plummeted downward as if an unseen weight had pushed it from the other side. Staggering back, she bumped into the slide. In that moment, Anna heard a guttural whisper. "Get out!" The voice seemed to echo from the slide itself. As she shone her flashlight on it, she could see dark symbols appearing, then fading on its surface. Signs that looked eerily similar to the ritualistic symbols she'd seen in an old book at the library. Her dad's watch beeped. It was midnight. The entire playground began to rumble. Anna felt the earth beneath her tremble as if it was waking from an eternal slumber. The swings, seesaws, and slides moved erratically now, as if possessed by the spirits of the ancient coven. Terrified, Anna sprinted towards the gate, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if an invisible force had locked it. She looked back and saw the shadows converging on the slide, morphing into a dark, humanoid figure. With no other option, she did the only thing that came to mind. She took out the small vial of salt her grandmother had given her, for good luck, and quickly formed a circle around her. She stood inside it and chanted the Lord's Prayer. The dark figure seemed to howl in rage, its shadowy form disintegrating into a cloud of black mist. The playground equipment ceased its sinister dance, and the force holding the gate vanished. Gasping for breath, Anna pushed open the gate and bolted out of the devil's playground. She didn't stop running until she reached her home, burst through the door, and embraced the realm of safety and light. The next day, the town council received numerous complaints about malfunctioning playground equipment. Swings had chains missing, seesaws were broken, and the slide had inexplicably cracked in half. Anna never spoke of that night, but she also never set foot in the devil's playground again, even in daylight. And so, the legend of the haunted playground grew. But the children and adults wrote it off as just another scary story. Except for Anna, who kept the vial of salt in her pocket at all times. She knew some stories were born of truth, and some playgrounds were better left alone, especially on Halloween night. And as for the devil's playground, well, it waited silently, biding its time until the next daring soul would decide to play in the dark.